Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Allan, and I'm a first-year MA student of Applied Linguistics at Ohio University. I'm very excited to be here today talking about some of the research that I've done on humor markers in Japanese VTuber video comments. I hope that those of you who are watching this pre-recorded talk, that I'll see you in a week after this has been uploaded at the live Q&A session. So without further ado, I'll jump right into this project. This research was prompted by the question of how do speakers convey pragmatic intent? And particularly, how do speakers convey humorous pragmatic intent? In traditional face-to-face communication, speakers can use visual and verbal cues, things like the tone of their voice, their intonation, timing, facial expressions or gestures, things of that nature. But when we look at computer-mediated communication, those same cues can't be used. Right? Speakers have to rely on what's called digital non-verbalization contextualization clues to convey pragmatic intent. So for the topic of this exploratory research study, I wanted to look at which sorts of digital contextualization cues are used to indicate humorous pragmatic intent. Looking at some of the background research that's already been conducted in this area, Christopher C. Wary in 1996 cited manipulation of punctuation, capitalization, or non-standardized spellings as different techniques that users in CMC can use to convey pragmatic intent or paralinguistic intent. I'd also like to cite Gretchen McCullough and her book, Because Internet, as well as some of the research conducted by Francisco Use, has expanded this into the use of keyboard smashes, GIFs, images and videos, sticker reactions as additional techniques that users can use to convey pragmatic intent. This particular study is based on the methodology of Audrey Adams, who wrote her thesis in 2012, where she looked at blog posts of a Star Trek fan community and identified the markers or the pragmatic cues used by those users to mark humor. And she identified a few different types. She identified punctuation, formatting type, which would include things like italics or boldface, capitalization. She also identified emoticons and emojis as a technique, laughter markers like LOL or LMAO, and explicit markers of humor. Now, my own background is in Japanese. I teach Japanese at Ohio University, and so I wanted to look not at English CMC, but at Japanese CMC and what sorts of humor markers were used in that context. And I did find some research conducted by Takamura and Katayama on the pragmatic functions of laughter markers in Japanese CMC. So laughter markers are not only used to acknowledge humor or to indicate laughter, but they can also be used to soften illocutionary force and to save face or avoid face-threatening acts. So they have a few different pragmatic usages. However, I didn't see much research done on other types of humor markers. And so for the purpose of this study, I'd like to expand that beyond just laughter markers in Japanese CMC to include additional potential humor markers. And for the purpose of this research, I looked at a discourse community that was familiar to me, which is VTube. And for those of us who are watching this and may not be familiar with VTube, I do have a slide here explaining what it is. A VTuber stands for virtual YouTuber. These are online streamers. Either they stream video games, they may sing, they may have live talking sessions, but rather than using their own likeness as a streamer, they will use an animated avatar. So you can see in this screenshot, I have an example of an animated avatar that is synced up to the streamer's physical movements. So as the speaker moves their mouth, the avatar also moves their mouth. If they rock back and forth, then the avatar does the same. This is quite popular in Japan. And in fact, two of the major VTuber companies I have listed here, Hololive and Nijisanji, both with over 50 million subscribers on YouTube. And these companies will manage hundreds of VTuber talents. They typically organize them into subgroups based on the language that they stream in, when they debuted, or their gender. So for example, HoloLive has an Indonesian VTuber group that streams in Indonesian. You'll see sometimes all male groups of VTubers or all female groups of VTubers. But this was a unique discourse community that I'm familiar with, and so I wanted to look into data from this community in particular. So I first needed to collect data, so I pulled about 5,000 YouTube comments that were posted on HoloLive's VTuber videos. I chose content videos rather than some of the other types of videos that these streamers post. They might post musical covers or animated shorts, but those tend to be very short, and content videos tend to be a bit longer and have more comments. So I looked at content videos. I collected the data last year from February to November and had to clean the comments because in some instances there were English comments, Korean comments, or Chinese comments. So I pulled only the Japanese comments for this data set. I then followed the methodology that was used by Audrey Adams in her thesis. So first, I needed to identify which of the comments were considered humorous. And I did this with the same criteria that Adams used. So humorous comments were identified if they fulfilled any of these three criteria. First, if they were explicitly acknowledged by the poster as humorous. So if the poster said something like, "Do you know this joke?" And paved the way for there to be a joke following, then it was considered humorous. If other users received the post as humor and replied with a comment like, "That's so funny," or "That's a great joke," it was considered humor. Or if the post followed the general theory of verbal humor, then it was considered humorous. So I went through these comments and identified which fulfilled these criteria, and then had a native speaker validate my judgments. And after some discussion, we arrived at a final 205 humorous comments from that initial data set. After having isolated the humorous comments, then I went in and started to mark humor markers which appeared. And this humor marker coding, again, based off of Adams's thesis, but I also added a few additional categories that are specific to the Japanese language. So Japanese doesn't allow capitalization, so that category was erased. However, there are 3 different scripts, or 4 in Japanese if you include the Roman alphabet. So script choice was added, sentence final particles, phoneme manipulation, character sizing. These were all additional categories that I added for the sake of Japanese. And after having marked all of the humor markers that appeared in those comments, I reached a total of 264, which includes any of the unmarked posts. So I would like to talk about the overall results. You can see here in this graph, most of the humor markers were punctuation. Quite a large percentage of the comments were also not marked with any marker. And then the third most commonly used marker were laughter markers. And shortly, I'll talk a bit more in depth about some of these categories, starting with punctuation. So you can see here, I have created a table that further subdivides the punctuation type used as humor markers. The most frequently used were ellipses, followed by exclamation points and quotation marks. And I do have an example here of one of the comments from the data set. For context, this was a reply sent to the original poster who had created a list of timestamps in the YouTube video in which the VTuber screamed. And the original commenter made the list of timestamps and commented, "This is for my own personal use." And so this user then replied to that additional user using the quotation marks to sort of tease or make fun of the original poster and ask them, "Are you going to become a video clipper or someone who makes clips of these poignant moments from the video?" Next, I'll talk about laughter markers. You can see here there are 4 different laughter markers that appeared in the data set, and overwhelmingly the W variant seemed to be preferred by these CMC users. The W variant, it can be written as 1W, or it can be reduplicated as 2 Ws, 3 Ws, if you want to increase the intensity of the laughter. And I do have an example here where the commenter is saying, "VCR GTA is peaceful today too, LOL." This VCR GTA is referring to the streamer is playing Grand Theft Auto, which for those of you who are maybe not familiar with that, it's a video game and it is known for not being peaceful at all. So this is a bit of an ironic comment. Grand Theft Auto is not peaceful, and yet this poster is saying, "Oh, it's peaceful today as well." Next, I want to talk about script choice. So in Japanese, there are 3 or 4 different scripts if you include the English or Roman alphabet. So there is hiragana, which is used for native Japanese words. It's often used for particles or for conjugating verbs. There's katakana, which is used for loan words of foreign origin. And there is kanji or Chinese characters, which are often used to represent words that were borrowed from Chinese. Oftentimes, compound nouns and verbs take a kanji. And overwhelmingly, in this data set, katakana was used for stylistic emphasis to indicate humor. So you can see in this example here, Kuroni is the name of a VTuber who is also a HoloLive talent. However, Kuroni doesn't appear in the video from which this comment was taken. And so normally this comment would be written in hiragana, but almost all of it, excepting 1 character, have been written in katakana. And this may be because of the fact that Kuroni does not appear in the original video. Using katakana might emphasize that this text sounds outside, foreign, or sort of interrupting in some way. Lastly, I'll talk about the use of multiple markers or markers used in combinations. It was somewhat rare to see them used in combinations. Only in about 17% of the comments were multiple markers used, and most of the time only 2 markers were used together. The most common combinations included punctuation plus a laughter marker, or punctuation plus emoji, punctuation plus sentence final particle, laughter marker plus emoji, or punctuation plus script choice. And I do have an example here in which this poster is using punctuation and sentence final particle. So you can see they use an ellipses before the humorous incongruity appears. And the sentence final particle used here, zo, is often used to create a more masculine sounding utterance or more forceful. So these are used in combination to sort of emphasize the incongruity or the punchline that arrives. So in conclusion, at least in the context of Japanese VTuber videos, humor is most frequently either unmarked or marked with punctuation marks or marked with laughter markers. And this may be due to the fact that this data was taken from a particular discourse community, and it may be that CMC users in that shared discourse community believe that other members of the community will understand their pragmatic intentions, therefore they don't need to mark humor because they assume that others will understand the intent to produce humor. So in the future, because this was only an exploratory study, my data set is more limited than I would like, and I believe that in the future, there could be opportunities to expand this data set and maybe investigate some other discourse communities, not only VTube, but maybe other YouTube streamers, maybe other companies. So I looked at HoloLive specifically, but expanding this into Niji and producing a larger data set might give me some different results. So I want to thank you for staying and watching this video. And as I said before, I really hope to see some of you in the live Q&A session next week. Thank you very much.